Hello, Amrita. Do you know where they live? Yeah, I just wondered if we were on the left side or the right side.
I'm guessing she finished the chapter. So
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel reading, the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I'm going to start by reading the bookmark, which is quickly becoming a favorite prayer here. It's beautiful. O Mother, I throw myself on your mercy. I take shelter at your hallowed feet. Be gracious and grant that I might have pure love for you, a love unsmitten by cravings for earthly things, untainted by any selfish end. A love desired by the devotee for the sake of love alone. And grant me the favor, Mother, that I may not be deluded by this world-bewitching Maya. There is no one but you whom I will call my own. Mother, I don't know how to worship. I'm without austerity. I have neither devotion nor knowledge. Be gracious, Mother, and out of your infinite mercy, grant me love for your lotus feet. Certainly a beautiful prayer. It really speaks to that relationship with the divine that isn't based on performance. It isn't based on achievement. It's based on grace. And the faith, which is also important, is not about things without evidence, but about the depth of love that's involved in this dance of living in the presence of the divine. We're going to read Appendix B, a letter, today in the Gospel, and it starts off, My beloved brother M. 3 days ago, I received the fourth part of the Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, which is this book, the Gospel, sent by you, and today I have finished reading it. You are blessed indeed. What heavenly nectar you have sprinkled all over the country. A long time ago, you wanted me to set down my conversations with the Master. Now I shall try to write them for you. But I was not born under the lucky star of an M, that I might jot down the days, the dates, and the hours of my visits with the Master, to note down correctly all of the words uttered by his holy lips. In this letter, I am giving you as many of my experiences as I can remember. Very likely I shall confuse the events of one day with another, and I have forgotten many things. It was probably during the autumn holidays of 1881 that I met Sri Ramakrishna for the first time. I arrived at Dakshineshwar in the country boat, and going up the steps of the landing ghat, asked someone where the Paramahamsa was. There is the Paramahamsa, was the reply. A man was pointing out on the north end of the veranda, which faces the garden. He was sitting, reclining against a bolster. He wore a black bordered cloth. At the sight of the bolster and the black bordered cloth, I said to myself, what kind of Paramahamsa is this? Going nearer, I found him half leaning against the bolster with his hands clasped around his drawn-up knees. Then I thought, evidently he is not used to pillows as gentlemen are, so perhaps he is the Paramahamsa. At his right, very near the pillow, sat a gentleman whose name I came to know was Rajendra Lal Mitra, later an assistant secretary of the government of Bengal. A little farther off sat some others. After a few moments, the master said to Rajendra Babu, "See whether Keshab is coming." Evidently, Keshab Sen was expected that day. There's quite a few things going on here that I really appreciate, and some of them are actually the foundational to why I'm interested in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. The fact that he had no pretensions about him, that he wasn't dressed like a holy man, he wasn't afraid to lean up against, of course we're talking about a very high level of renunciation here. In India, a sannyasin wouldn't even accept a pillow on a couch for comfort, and so that's why this gentleman is kind of wondering about Ramakrishna having a bolster, a big round pillow up behind him, and he's holding it with his arm and sitting comfortably. And this man thinks, really, this is a Paramahamsa, this is a God-realized soul. He's dressed like that and sitting comfortably with a bolster and has a government official sitting there talking to him. And so we find that Ramakrishna's real spiritual life is in his living, in his relationship with the divine, in the way he lived and moved. It wasn't in all of the, showy robes and the more spectacular movements of renunciation. It was just in his simple way of being, his absolute authenticity. After a few moments, the master said to Rajendra Babu, "See whether Keshab is coming." Keshab Sen was expected that day. Someone walked away a few steps and coming back said, "No, he isn't." And after a brief interval, hearing a sound outside, he said, "Please look once more." So you see his childlike nature there. Again, someone went out and came back with the same reply. Then Sri Ramakrishna laughed and said, quoting a popular saying, "The leaves rustle outside and Radha says, 'Oh, here comes my sweetheart.'" Continuing, he said, "You see, Keshab always tantalizes me like this. It's his way." At dusk, Keshab came with his party. Keshab bowed low before the master, touching the ground with his forehead. The master returned his salutation in the same manner. Shortly afterward, Sri Ramakrishna said, in a state of partial consciousness, "Look, he's brought the whole Calcutta crowd. I am supposed to deliver a lecture. I won't do anything of the sort. Do it yourself if you like. Lecturing is none of my business." Still in that ecstatic mood, he said with a divine smile, "I shall eat and drink and be merry. I shall play and I shall sleep, but I can't give lectures." As Keshab Babu watched him, he became overpowered with divine emotion. Every now and then he said, "Ah, me, ah, me." That's the effect of Sri Ramakrishna right there, just that humility, that playfulness, that just absolute, what he was is what he was. There was nothing manufactured about him at all. You get nothing but pure love when in that presence, enough to where someone even seasoned like Keshab Sen would sit there and just take it in, just enjoy that presence. To be in the presence of someone who's single-minded. They're not at all sitting there calculating out moves or comments or who's in the room or how many people have come. He's just sitting there with love, focused, sharply. Everyone he looks at is the benefactor of his full attention, his absolute acceptance of them. To have that experience of sitting in the presence of a holy woman or a holy man, and having them look at the you of you, not stop at the face, not stop at your characteristics and attributes, not at your personality, but to look beyond all of that, to see the you behind your eyes, behind your mind, behind your personality. It's an amazing and beautiful experience, and one worth praying for. I too watched the Master and said to myself, can this be pretense? I had never seen anything like it before, and you know how deep my faith is. Coming back from Samadhi, the Master said to Keshav, Keshav, once I went to your temple. In the course of your preaching, I heard you say, we shall dive into the river of devotion and go straight to the ocean of Satchitananda. At once I looked up at the gallery where Keshav's wife and the other ladies were sitting and thought, well, what's going to become of these ladies? You see, Keshav, you are all householders. How can you reach the ocean of Satchitananda all at once? You are like a mongoose with a brick tied to its tail. When something frightens it, it runs up into the wall and tries to climb into its niche. But how can it stay there for any length of time? The brick pulls it back down and it falls to the floor with a thud. You may practice a little meditation, but the weight of wife and children will pull you down. You may dive into the river of devotion, but you must come up again. You will alternately dive and come up. How can you dive and disappear once and for all? It's a beautiful statement, and really one that's utterly true. He's not judging the householder here. He's judging the mixture of caste, as it were, that Keshav was talking about. That Keshav, talking to a room full of householders, would say, let us dive into this river of Satchitananda. Let us go into Samadhi and leave this world altogether. And that's a statement, you know, it's a nice thing to say, it's a nice thing to think, it's a wonderful ideal. But if one isn't in that state or in that space, it's not the right thing, it's not the best teaching. Because of that fact, that they have wives and children and a society that depends on them, not to mention the monasteries that depend on the householder. The path of the householder he's highlighting here, just by contrast, is to earn money, to live in the world, to seek out those things, but for a very high purpose, for taking care of yourself, and once you've reached your needs, to take care of your family, their friends, and then beyond that, the society around you. That you are the support of this institution, the support of these monks and nuns, the support of these paramahamsas, wherever they might be. They depend on your being faithful in your path as a devotee, as a householder, to do your part in your devotion and to express your devotion in your excellent work and in your focused care and in your dedicated service to those who depend on you. That's the path of the householder. And through that you see the divine. Through that you touch the divine. And in the end, perhaps Samadhi will come, and that merging into the one. How can you dive into and disappear once and for all? Keshu Babu said, can't a householder ever succeed? What about Maharshi Devendranath Tagore? Twice or thrice the Master repeated softly, Devendranath Tagore, Devendra, Devendra. And he bowed to him several times. Then he said, let me tell you a story. A man used to celebrate the Durga Puja at his house with great pomp. Goats were sacrificed from sunrise to sunset. But after a few years, the sacrifice was not so imposing. Then someone said to him, how is it, sir, that the sacrifice at your place has become such a tame affair? Don't you see, he said, my teeth are gone now. Devendra is now devoted to meditation and contemplation. It is only natural that he should be at his advanced age, but no doubt he is a great man. You see, as long as a man is under Maya's spell, that is, as long as a man or a woman thinks that there's anything to be gained in this world, to think that there's anything here to take, As long as we live in that state, we're not ready for those higher teachings. We're not ready to dive in to that ocean of Satchitananda and lose our individuality, lose our very sense of self. That remains our ideal, to lose ourselves in pure love and absolute love. But our duty is to investigate, to break that chain that makes us think there's something here to take. You know, that's one of the first lessons that we see, and really part of our constant discernment about the nature of things. It's not that you can't have anything in this world. It's not that it's forbidden to you. It's truly and honestly that there's nothing here to take. You come into the world empty-handed and you leave the world empty-handed. It's a zero-sum game. Collect all you want. Pull it all into your home if you want to. Marry as many people as you like. Have as many children as you want. Go out and seek all the pleasure you can find. But do it with discernment. Do it to understand the nature of what you're looking for. Do it in an attempt to verify the satisfaction that all of it brings. Is it worth the dedication of life? When in the end you have to lay down and leave everything that you've built, every one that you've collected. And so he's saying, you know, as long as a man is under Maya's spell, as long as you think there's something out there, it's your duty to go and look at it, to touch it, to discern about it, to really take a very close look at it. He says, as long as a person is under Maya's spell, he's like a green coconut. When you scoop out the soft kernel from the green coconut, you cannot help scraping a little of the shell at the same time. But in the case of a ripe and dry coconut, the shell and kernel are separated from each other. When you shake the fruit, you can feel the kernel rattling inside. The man who is freed from Maya is like a ripe and dry coconut. He feels the soul to be separated from the body. They are no longer connected with each other. You see, that is the ripe coconut, when you know who you are. Now, before we know who we are, that's kind of a nebulous statement. Like, you know, who am I? Who am I? It doesn't mean a whole lot. It's through practice and through discernment that you come to see the distinction. When you begin to understand that, you know, one of my favorite things, I probably say this every time I lecture, but nobody's complained yet. But this notion of coming to the understanding that you are not the mind. You are watching the mind, so by necessity you are not it. So can the mind give you anything if you are just watching it? It can give you distraction, just like a television set, but it can't feed you and sustain you and nourish you. It can just show you its dance. The body is the same, you know, and it's the unripeness has to do with us thinking it's all one, that I am the body and I am the mind. So that when somebody asks us how we are, of course, the same thing we always talk about. You query your mind. If you give a mental answer, you say something like, oh, I'm feeling a little lonely, oh, I'm a little angry, you know, or whatnot. If you're querying the body, you'll say things like, well, I'm a little tired, my feet hurt, you know, I feel like I need a vacation. But how do you query you? Who is the third part in there that you're not mentioning? If you're not the body and you're not the mind, what are you? And that is what Ramakrishna is saying will determine you to be a ripe coconut. When you know that, when you know that. Because through that separateness from body, you know that the things of the body can't feed you. And through your knowledge of the separateness from the mind, you know that the mind cannot entertain you. And it brings great import to that statement in the Gita when it says that the soul cannot be burned, cannot be wedded. The fact that he's trying to say there, not really the physical nature of the soul, but to get you to understand there's nothing in this world for you, the soul. Why? Because it's all of you, like the dream. You've created your reality. This moment is the sum total of the desires you've fulfilled. If you're happy in it, maybe there's been some good karma. If you're not happy in it, maybe there's been some better karma. But Ramakrishna is encouraging us to come to this knowledge and to see. He says it is the I that creates all of this trouble, that ego, that sense of particular, that sense of specific self. Won't this wretched ego ever leave a person? You see a peepal tree growing from the rubbish of a tumbled-down house. You cut it down today, but tomorrow you find a new sprout shooting up. It is the same with the ego. You may wash 7 times a cup that onions have been kept in, but that wretched smell is never going to leave it. So this is our plight here. This ego is a great enemy of ourself as long as it exists with our I identified with it, when we really believe in it. And you say, oh, I'm not such a bad person. No, that's not the point. The point is, look at the world that we live in right now. Look at the condition of the world. It is because of ego alone. And all of our egos may not be individually responsible for the whole of the situation in the world, but all of us had added our little part to it. And so this is the urgency to spiritual life. This is the urgency to practice and to know. Because for this world to be as we know it can be, we have to give up that, this notion of me and mine. And we have to practice until we naturally come to the point of you and yours. He says that as much as we try and cut it down, it just keeps coming back. And the beauty of that is it again brings us back to the fact that our relationship with the divine, with the universe, with ourself, is not based on the accomplishment of being able to cut down the ego. It's based on the love of God and the fact that that divine presence is within us and gives us our value for who we are. That we approach God because of that. We know the ego is there. We know as much as we try, it's not going away. But we don't become sad about that. We don't focus on that. Because all that does is demonstrate to us the mercy of the divine, the grace of the divine. So we use our faults as they exist until we transcend them little by little through our practice. We use our faults to remind us of the grace of God, to remind us of a love without condition, not to focus on the fact that we have faults and that we have shortcomings. What you think, you become. In the course of the conversation, he said to Keshab, well, Keshab, I understand that your Calcutta Babus say that God does not exist. Is that true? A Calcutta Babu wants to climb the stairs. He takes one step, but before taking the next, he cries out, oh, my side, just drops down unconscious. His relatives raise a hue and cry and send for a doctor, but before the doctor arrives, the man is very likely dead. And people of such stamina say, there is no God. Now, why is it, first of all, you're thinking, what's the connection there? Well, the connection is that to know God is an effort. To know God is a dedicated desire. It's an understanding of the nature of things and realizing that this material pursuit has left you hungry, has left you undone. And then it's the matter of dedicating yourself. It's like having a healthy marriage. It's, having a good marriage is a lot of work. That's why it's a path to God. It's like the monk renounces ego by renouncing all of it and just letting go and walking away and keeping the hands raised, But the devotee does the same work by learning to compromise with his partner, by learning to serve his children. They don't go away for a season. They don't give you a vacation. They don't leave you alone. I know, I've been a very bad one my whole life. It's this notion. But that's the practice. That's the work. That's the dedication. There is no way to reach this beautiful state of being fully human until we work out to remove that dedicated animal within us, the me and mine, the animal creature of habit and reaction, and not of love and service. So he's laughing at the Calcutta Babu, who says, oh, there is no God, after having done no work to realize it or to research it, who just says it. And he says it's just worthless. It doesn't even mean anything when someone who has made no investigation says there's no God. It doesn't matter. I mean, what did they do? It's like me giving a lecture on quantum physics. It would be very entertaining. I would make sure of it. But could you actually do anything with it? It's very doubtful, because I know nothing of quantum physics. And so he's saying that here. And he's saying that the people running around saying the loudest that there is none have tried the least in their investigation, quite possibly, without a judgment attached. After an hour or so, the kirtan began. Let's see what time it is here. Okay. He saw that the kirtan, the singing, had begun. What I saw then I shall never forget, either in this life or in the lives to come. Everybody danced, Keshab included. The master, he was in the center of it all. They danced around him in a circle, and during the dancing, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly stood motionless, transfixed, in samadhi. A long time passed this way. After hearing his words and seeing all of this, I said to myself, yes, a Paramahamsa indeed. Another day, probably in 1883, I visited the master with a few young men from Srirampur. Looking at them, he asked, why have they come here? Myself, to see you. The master, what's there to see in me? Why don't they look at the buildings and the temples? Myself, sir, they haven't come to see those things. They've come to see you. Master, well then they must be flints. There is fire in them. You may keep a flint under water 1,000 years, but the moment you strike it, sparks will come out. They must be of that type. But it will be useless to try to strike fire out of me. At this last remark, we all laughed. I do not recall now what the other things he said to us that day were, but it seems to me he told us about that renunciation of lust and greed, and the impossibility of getting rid of the ego. I'm going to read one more paragraph here, I think. I visited him another day. When I bowed down to him and took a seat, he said, can you bring me some of that stuff, a little sour, a little sweet, that begins to fizz when you push down the cork? Myself, lemonade? Master, yeah, why don't you bring a bottle for me? I think I brought him a bottle. So far as I remember, I was alone with him that day, and I asked him a few questions. Myself, do you observe caste? Master, how can I say yes? I ate curry at Keshab Sen's house. Let me tell you what once happened to me. A man with a long beard brought some ice here, but I didn't feel like eating it. A little later, someone brought me a piece of ice from the same man, and I ate it with great relish. You see, caste restrictions fall away of themselves. As coconut and palm trees grow up, the branches drop off of themselves. Caste conventions drop off like that, but don't tear them off, as these fools do, meaning the Brahmos. Myself, well, what do you think of Keshab Babu? Master, he is a saintly man. Myself, and Trilokya Babu? Master, a fine man. He sings very well. Myself, Shivanath Babu? Master, a very good man, but he argues. Myself, what is the difference between a Hindu and a Brahmo? Master, there isn't much difference. In the serenade we have here, one flutist plays a single note right along, and another one plays various melodies. The Brahmos play one note, as it were. They hold to the formless aspect of God. But the Hindu brings out different melodies. That is to say, they enjoy God in all of his various aspects. The formless deity and God with form may be likened to water and ice. The water freezes into ice. The ice melts into water through the heat of jnana, and water takes the form of ice through the cooling influence of bhakti. The reality is one. People give it various names. Take the case of a lake with 4 landing ghats on its 4 banks. People who draw water from one ghat will call it jal, and those who draw it from the other ghat will call it pani. And the third ghat, well, maybe they'll call it water, and at the fourth ghat, aqua. But it is one and the same thing, water. I told the master that I had met Akalananda Tirthavaduta of Barastal. The master, isn't that Ramkumar of Kotrang? Myself, yes, sir. How did you like him? Myself, very much. Well, whom do you like better, him or me? Myself, oh, can there be a comparison between you two? He's like a scholar, an erudite person. But are you one? Sri Ramakrishna was a little puzzled at my reply, became silent. A moment later he said, he may be a scholar, but you are full of fun. There is great fun in your company. At this, the master laughed and said, well said, right you are. He asked me, have you seen my Panchavati? Yes, sir. He told me a little of what he had practiced there, his various religious austerities. He also told me about Nangta. Then I asked him, how can I realize God? Master, you see, he is constantly attracting us, as a magnet attracts iron. But the iron, it cannot come to the magnet if it's covered with dirt. When the dirt is washed away, the iron is instantly drawn to the magnet. Weep for God, and the tears will wash away the dirt from your mind. As I was writing down his words, he remarked, look here, only repeating the word siddhi will not produce intoxication. You must actually get some hemp, rub it in water, and then drink the solution. Later he said, since you are going to lead a householder life, create a roseate intoxication in your mind with the thought of God. You will be doing your duties, but let that pleasant intoxication remain with you. You cannot, of course, like Shukadeva, be so inebriated with the thought of God that you will lie naked and unconscious. As long as you have to live in the world, give God the power of attorney. Make over all your responsibilities to him. Let him do as he likes. Live in the world like a maidservant in a rich man's house. She bathes her master's children, washes them and feeds them, and takes affectionate care of them in many ways, as if they were her own children. But in her heart, she knows very well that they do not belong to her. No sooner is she dismissed than all is over. She has no more relationship with those children. It's a beautiful place to end there. To create in yourself, he says here, a roseate intoxication at the name of God within your mind. And to keep that in your mind, to keep that in your heart throughout the day, that is what breaks the boundaries of your morning and evening practice and turns the whole of your life into practice, is to keeping that beautiful, beautiful warmth of the divine love kindled inside, constantly every now and then throughout the day, every few minutes, throwing a few logs of the name of God on it, occasionally a piece of kindling in the form of a prayer, maybe some paper in the form of a song, or maybe a little bit of fanning it by talking to someone, knowing that it is the divine in them that you're addressing. To use all of these practices to keep alive that beautiful sense of love within you, so that it radiates from you, so that you have something to give, something to share. As we started, knowing that there was nothing to take in this world, because we enter with nothing and we leave with nothing. Conversely, we're born into love, into a family, and we leave with them standing around us, showing the same love. So quite clearly, that is the point of life: to love, to care, to nurture, to build up, to always hope, always believe, always serve, to keep that beautiful inspiration alive at any cost in your day. And then will come your absorption. Then will come the time for you to enjoy the fruit of that union with the beloved. May it be that way. May it be that way for everyone, for every single person. All right, there's a few things going on. Of course, tomorrow is the lecture, which is what brought me here, presumably. It could have been bookshop shelves, who knows. Yes, and so tomorrow it's going to be in the beginning. We're going to take a different perspective on the story of the Adam and Eve in the garden. We're going to look at it from a Vedantic perspective. And then Wednesday for Seekers of God with Pravrajaka Krishna Prana. And what is the date today? It's the 19th. So, oh yes, that's me. That's what we're doing right now. All right. So be a part of that. I always like to share with folks, at these places, to remember that this place is yours. That your karma has brought you here. This moment is the summation, as we mentioned, of all of your desires. And what a beautiful thing that it brought all of us to the same room to hear about these teachings. So take great delight in being here with people whose sum total of desire has brought them this close to you and brought all of us so close to the divine. So take full advantage of that and really put the value in the Sangha. Put the value in having friends who care about you, and make this your laboratory of love, of being selfless. Practice with each other. With that, Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji.